Montana Territory, July of 1878. The blow landed with such force that she staggered back onto the dusty thoroughfare. Blood immediately began to stream from her lacerated lip. "Keep your trap shut next time, you hussy," the man snarled, advancing as if he intended to strike her once more. Before his foot made contact, a boot intercepted his jaw with a sharp crack that reverberated off every shop front and saloon wall. The assailant crumpled to the ground, dazed, and within moments, his nose met a fist with a sickening crunch. "She's got me now," the stranger declared, standing over the man's prostrate form. "That's all you require." His tone was measured, but his gaze burned with intensity. Jessa Rowan blinked up at him, her senses reeling from the pain and shock. She had not anticipated any intervention, much less from a man of this stature, tall, broad-shouldered, his coat speckled with trail dust, a revolver holstered low on his thigh, as though he had materialized from the wilderness. The man extended a hand, not with presumption, but with simple offering. "Are you all right?" She accepted it. Her hand trembled within his, yet her voice remained firm. "I can stand." He assisted her to her feet with a delicate touch, as if anticipating her potential collapse. "Name's Boone Lard." "Jessa," she replied, brushing away the grit from her skirt with her free hand. "Jessa Rowan!" He cast a glance at the unconscious man. "Who in the blazes was that? Just some fellow who had had too much to drink and fancied I owed him something for saying no." Boone regarded her closely. "Truly? You're certain you're unharmed?" Her lip was still bleeding, a bruise already blooming on her cheek, but her chin was lifted defiantly. "I've endured worse." Boone disliked the implication of that statement intensely. A sheriff finally emerged, hurrying from the opposite side of the street, his shirt half-buttoned and his face flushed. "What in thunder is transpiring here?" Boone turned to him, his voice even. "This individual struck her. I intervened." The sheriff surveyed Boone's bloodied knuckles and the groaning man in the dirt. "You broke his nose." "Indeed," Boone confirmed, his composure unwavering. "And I'd do it again." The sheriff appeared poised to protest, but a glimpse of Jessa's face caused him to relent. "Jessa, do you wish to press charges?" "No," she answered, and Boone detected the tightening in her voice. "Just remove him from the street." The sheriff muttered under his breath and dragged the man away. Jessa turned to depart, but Boone followed. "Allow me to escort you." "I'm quite well." "I believe you," he conceded. "However, I'm still accompanying you." She did not object. They walked side by side along the dirt road, past the fractured panes of the general store and the weathered sign of the boarding house. Boone kept his gaze fixed ahead, but each of his steps mirrored hers. He had no inkling of her identity, only that he had witnessed her absorb a blow intended to silence her, and then resolutely stand her ground. He admired that. She paused before a narrow, leaning structure with peeling white paint and a crooked mailbox. "This is it." Boone nodded. "You reside alone." "I fail to see how that concerns you." "I merely meant," he explained. His countenance was weathered from the journey, his jaw dark with stubble, his eyes shadowed beneath the brim of his wide hat. Yet there was an undeniable honesty in his voice, a sturdiness. She opened the door. "Are you hungry?" Boone blinked. "I could eat." "Then come inside." He followed her into the modest dwelling. It comprised 2 rooms and a kitchen that carried the aroma of herbs and burning wood. A young girl's bonnet hung on a hook near the entrance. Boone noticed it. "Do you have children?" Jessa washed her hands at the basin. "One, her name is Veda. She is 6 years old. She's staying with Mrs. Hensley tonight. I didn't want her exposed to the saloon while I worked." Boone frowned. "You work in the saloon?" "I serve drinks, wipe tables. That's all, though men often misinterpret that." He nodded, his jaw set. "That man from earlier was merely the latest," she confessed, "but hopefully the last." Boone watched her movements, noting the wince as she lifted the pot from the stove. "Let me assist." She handed him a spoon. "Stir that." They stood shoulder to shoulder by the stove, the silence between them comfortable, not awkward. Boone added salt. Jessa chopped carrots. Her lips still bled, but she offered a faint smile when he attempted to taste the stew and burned his tongue. After their meal, she leaned against the kitchen wall, arms crossed. "Do you habitually assault strangers on behalf of women you've never met?" Boone looked up from drying the plates with a towel. Only when they merit it. Jessa tilted her head. And you've determined I do? I have. She gazed at him, a mixture of wariness and curiosity in her eyes. You don't even know me. I know enough. You absorbed a blow and remained upright. You're raising a child alone. You welcomed me into your home without hesitation. That's more than sufficient for me. Jessa looked away, her voice soft. She was left to me. My sister perished during childbirth. I was 20 years old. I possessed nothing but this house. Veda was 3 days old. I raised her nonetheless. Boone's voice was gentle. You are a good woman. No, she corrected, I am a weary one. He moved closer, not touching her, but gently closing the distance. Then allow me to help carry the load. She looked up at him, her eyes tired yet clear. You don't even know what it entails. I don't need to. Outside, the wind stirred, signaling an approaching storm. Yet, inside, something more stable was beginning to form. Slow, unpretentious, genuine. Jessa reached up and touched the edge of the bruise on her cheek. You stayed. I did. And you won't vanish tomorrow. Boone shook his head. Not unless you dismiss me. She stepped closer, just enough for her shoulder to brush against his chest. Then stay. I will. Her voice lowered. I don't require rescuing. Boone offered a faint smile. I'm not here to rescue you, Jessa. Then why? He met her gaze. Because now you have me. That's all you need. Veda returned the following morning, shortly after sunrise, barefoot and dragging a brown scrap of cloth she referred to as her rabbit. Boone stood by the window, lacing his boots, and saw her before Jessa did. She ran up the porch steps and burst through the door, her hair disheveled from sleep, her eyes wide. Mama, who is this? Boone crouched to her level. My name is Boone. Your mother required my assistance last night. Jessa emerged from the small bedroom, tying her apron. That's all? Veda looked at her mother's bruised cheek, then back at Boone. Did you hit the bad man? Boone nodded once. I did. She regarded him for a long moment before extending her rabbit. You can hold Mr. Henry if you like. He accepted it gingerly, as if it were fragile. That's thoughtful of you. Jessa watched the exchange, her arms folded. Veda, go wash up. There's bread on the counter. The girl skipped off, her rabbit retrieved, and Boone rose again. She's spirited, he commented. She had to be, Jessa replied. Too many things in this world aim to diminish girls. Boone offered no argument. He picked up his hat from the table but did not put it on. I'm considering heading west of town. There's a rancher looking for assistance mending fence lines. It could be a few weeks' work. Jessa wiped her hands on her apron. You don't need my permission. I'm not seeking it, he clarified. I'm informing you that I'll be nearby. She hesitated before responding. Then you don't owe me anything, Boone. He moved closer, but not intrusively. It's not a debt. It's a choice. Veda returned, a chunk of bread in one hand and a green ribbon in the other. Mama, can I tie my braid with this today? Jessa nodded. Go sit on the step. I'll do it shortly. Boone held the door open for the girl, then turned back. If you need anything at all, send word. I'll come. Jessa looked down at her hands. I don't accept charity. I'm not offering it. She glanced up. Then what are you offering? Boone's voice was quiet. A place to lean, not perpetually, just when you feel weary. She nodded once, a subtle acknowledgement. Boone stepped outside. By mid-afternoon, he had located the rancher, an elderly gentleman missing 3 fingers on his left hand, and commenced work in the south pasture with a post-hole digger and a roll of barbed wire. The labor was arduous and sharp, but it kept his thoughts from straying too far. Nevertheless, as dusk approached, he found himself gazing toward the road leading back to town. Meanwhile, Jessa stood in the garden behind her home, mending Veda's dress by lantern light. Her cheek throbbed, but she did not flinch. She recalled Boone's hands, the careful, steady way they had held the spoon. She remembered how he had looked at Veda, not as a burden, but as someone of significance. That night, she double-checked the locks before retiring, an ingrained habit rather than a manifestation of fear. Then, after Veda had settled against her in slumber, She reached for the window latch and opened it a sliver. The wind carried the scent of pine and horses, and the faintest hint of smoke. Somewhere out there, Boone was sleeping beneath the stars or in a barn, and for the first time in a considerable period, she did not feel utterly alone in the world. The subsequent morning, she discovered a sack of dried apples hanging from her gatepost. There was no accompanying note, and no footprints graced the walkway. She gazed down the empty road, then turned, a faint smile touching her lips, as she placed the fruit into her apron. The wind shifted eastward on the fourth day. Dust rose from the fence lines like the exhalations of a tired horse, and Boone labored with his sleeves rolled high, sweat darkening his collar. He had not returned to town, but he had taken to observing the ridge above the river each evening, as if her silhouette might materialize there, walking in the fading light. She never did. That afternoon, while driving in a stubborn post near the creek bed, a boy on a small chestnut mare rode up. He appeared no older than 11, his hat comically oversized, and his boots caked with the dust of many roads. "You Boone lard?" the young lad inquired, extending a creased piece of paper without awaiting a response. Boone, after wiping his hands on his trousers, accepted the note. The boy departed swiftly. By the time Boone smoothed out the message, the pony he had arrived on was already cantering back towards the settlement. The handwriting was shaky, yet perfectly legible. "Veda has taken ill with fever. I won't press you, but the door will be left unlocked." Boone did not pause to collect his belongings. He swiftly saddled his gelding and rode with haste, the sun already dipping low behind the hills, the horizon painted with the deepening hues of approaching twilight. Upon reaching the dwelling, he did not announce his presence. The door yielded to his touch, precisely as she had stated. Within, the air hung heavy with warmth and the mingled scents of vinegar and boiled cloth. Jessa sat on the floor by the small bed, Veda's hair clinging damply to her forehead, her slender frame swaddled in blankets. Boone entered, closing the door as silently as a whispered prayer. "She's a bit cooler than this morning," Jessa commented without looking up. "But the fever hasn't broken yet." He settled himself beside her, his knees protesting with a creak. "Do you require anything?" "I need this fever to break before dawn," her voice was strained. "And I need her to stop trembling, so—" Boone reached out, his hand grazing the child's ankle. "She is strong, small, yes, but I've witnessed smaller creatures endure worse." Jessa finally looked at him, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion. "Have you ever held a child consumed by fever?" "No," he replied. "But I have sat with dying men who called out for their mothers. That kind of fear leaves its mark." Jessa returned her gaze to Veda. "She is all I have." Boone remained silent, instead retrieving a clean cloth from his pocket and dipping it into the basin beside the bed. He wrung it out and gently placed it on Veda's wrist, his movements practiced and tender. They worked in quiet companionship, changing compresses, offering sips of water, murmuring comfort when she stirred. As midnight passed without a change, Boone prepared a kettle for the stove while Jessa rested her forehead against the wall. "Have you always resided in this town?" he asked softly, careful not to disturb the sleeping child. "No," she replied. "We relocated here when Veda was 2. Prior to that, we lived near Deer Lodge. Why did you depart?" "My sister fell ill. We sought assistance. She perished en route. I remained because I had no other destination." Boone poured hot water over the herbs she had arranged earlier. "My mother passed during childbirth. I was raised by my father's sister in Nebraska. She never desired the responsibility and ensured I was aware of it." Jessa turned her head to regard him. "And yet, you are here now, aiding another's child." "She is yours," Boone stated. "That is sufficient reason." The fire crackled softly. Veda stirred and whimpered, her face flushed with heat. Boone leaned in, but Jessa was there first, lifting her gently, applying a cool cloth to the nape of her neck. Then, unexpectedly, Veda released a long sigh and grew still, not limp, but quiescent. Her breathing steadied into a calmer, deeper rhythm. Jessa froze. Boone placed a hand on her shoulder. "That's it," he said. "That's the break." Jessa remained speechless. She simply drew her niece closer, rocking softly. When Veda drifted back into a cooler sleep, Boone stepped outside to grant Jessa solitude. He stood on the porch, gazing out at the silent road, the sky now pale with the approaching dawn. Jessa joined him a short while later, her arms wrapped around herself, loose strands of hair framing her face. "I honestly didn't believe she would make it through the night," she confessed. "She did. You didn't have to come, I know, but you did." Boone looked at her, the nascent light catching a faint bruise still diminishing on her cheek. "You left the door open." Jessa rested her hands on the porch railing. "I didn't anticipate this when I first met you. What did you expect? A stranger with a quick temper and a sharp demeanor." Boone offered a half laugh. "That's not entirely inaccurate, but I certainly didn't expect you to still be here after 4 days. I do not depart unless instructed to do so." Jessa remained quiet for a moment, the breeze stirring the hem of her nightgown. Then, her voice calm but firm, she stated, "I am not telling you to leave." Boone met her gaze. "Are you quite sure? I have never been more certain of anything." He slowly reached for her hand. She did not withdraw it. Inside, Veda slept soundly, her fever having subsided. Outside, the sun climbed above the ridge, bathing the frost-kissed grass in golden light. For the first time in years, neither of them felt entirely solitary. As August drew to a close, the days grew shorter, and the air took on a dry, crisp, golden quality. The fever did not return, and Veda was once again engrossed in chasing beetles through the garden and weaving scraps of calico into her braids. Jessa kept her close, however, placing a reassuring hand on her back during climbs and ensuring she remained within sight when venturing beyond the gate. Boone observed this. He made no inquiries. He simply remained. Most evenings, he returned from the ranch long after the sun had disappeared behind the ridge. Occasionally, he brought a sack of cornmeal or a bundle of kindling. At other times, he brought nothing but his presence, which Jessa had come to understand was more than enough. One night, as the stars intensified overhead and the chirping of crickets subsided, Boone leaned his shoulder against a porch post and remarked, "I encountered a fellow today who mentioned a tract of land situated between here and the foothills, currently uncultivated, mostly covered in scrub and featuring a dilapidated fence. He's looking to offload it for a modest sum." Jessa sat in the porch chair, a tin cup growing cool in her grasp. "Are you considering purchasing property?" "Perhaps. If I can repair the fencing before winter arrives and procure a reliable pair of mules, I could sow winter wheat by late October." She looked at him, her head tilted slightly. "Do you intend to establish yourself here?" He traced the grain of the wooden railing with his thumb. "That depends." "On what?" Boone inhaled slowly. "On whether I would be settling here alone." Jessa hesitated before responding. Then she stood, walked to the edge of the porch, and gazed into the darkness. "That land, how many acres does it encompass?" 23, give or take. "Water, a creek meanders along the back edge, shallow but consistent." She nodded once. "You would require a second pair of hands to make it productive." "I would." Jessa turned to face him. "You would need someone adept at mending garments, staunching bleeding, and preventing a child from reaching a stove with her hand." "I would," Boone repeated. She moved closer, so near that the hem of her dress brushed the tip of his boot. "Then perhaps you should ask properly." He met her gaze, his expression quiet and steady. "Jessa Rowan, would you consent to building a life with me? To raising that child under a roof we construct ourselves? To initiating something that does not fill you with apprehension to desire?" Jessa's voice was barely audible above the warm night air. "I am not easily intimidated. I know." She reached up, touching the frayed edge of his collar. "It would not be easy. No, there would be years where our labor would far exceed our provisions. There would be years where we would have an abundance of wheat, but insufficient time to mill it. And what if I grow tired of you?" Boone's mouth curved slightly, not quite a smile. "You won't." She did not kiss him. Not yet. But her hand remained on his shirt, her fingers clutching the fabric as if intending to hold fast. "You'll need to speak with the school teacher. Veda is close to reading, and I won't have her falling behind." "I shall do that first thing. And do not bring that mule near unless it is in good health. I will not have it trampling the cabbage rows. I will test its gait myself. And you had better be prepared to construct a chicken coop. I refuse to raise them in the parlor again." Boone straightened. "Do you intend to join me?" She nodded once. "I do." He reached out, taking her hand in his. "Then we shall commence next week." Jessa rested her head against his shoulder. "You've already purchased it, haven't you?" "This morning?" She emitted a low, full laugh. "You are fortunate I agreed." Boone turned his face toward hers, their lips nearly touching. "I knew you would. You left the door open." Inside, Veda's small feet padded softly across the floorboards as she shifted in her sleep. Outside, two figures stood close together beneath the starlit sky. Wordless, motionless, as steadfast as the land itself, awaiting its quiet cultivation, sowing, and transformation into something enduring. Boone secured the final hinge on the door just before the first frost arrived. The newly constructed cabin stood a quarter-mile from the creek, its timbers rough-hewn and its corners square, with smoke already wafting from the stovepipe and chicken wire stretched taut around the modest yard. It was not yet beautiful, but it withstood the wind, and its roof remained leak-free. That was sufficient. Jessa stood at the edge of the field, the hem of her dress damp from the dew-laden grass, observing Veda trailing a hen, an old hat of Boone's pulled low over her ears. The child had embraced the land as readily as spring follows winter. She had bestowed names upon each chicken, drawing them from towns she had never visited, and had erected a scarecrow that leaned so precariously to the right, Boone had to reinforce it with a fence post. Nevertheless, it held firm, and the birds remained at bay from the rose bushes. Boone approached Jessa from behind, brushing wood shavings from his sleeves. "She's fed them twice today. She's trying to make them like her." Jessa remarked. "Yesterday she offered them cornbread." Boone glanced over. "That explains our shortage. I saved you a portion." He smiled, gently brushing a stray curl from her temple. "You always do." She did not move away. "I was considering excavating a root cellar behind the shed. The soil is sufficiently soft. I shall dig it," he offered. "We will protect the potatoes from freezing, and if we properly enclose the coop, we might deter the foxes this winter." Boone nodded. "You are contemplating the future." "I am." He leaned his shoulder against hers. "I was thinking we ought to be married before the snow begins to fall." Jessa did not respond immediately. She watched Veda crouch in the grass, whispering to a hen named Helena. The girl's hair had grown longer, now tied back with a ribbon Boone had traded a flint striker for at the general store. "Are you proposing to me?" "I am." Jessa turned to face him. "Where would we find a clergyman this far out?" "There's a circuit rider who passes through once a month," he said. "I saw him near the mill road just last week. He remembered my name." She crossed her arms, but a softening settled around her mouth. "And you'd wed a woman incapable of sewing a perfectly straight seam, who might scorch the biscuits if her mind wandered. I would wed the woman who managed to keep a child alive with sheer determination," he declared. "She's the one who stood her ground in the middle of the street and never stooped to asking anyone for anything." Jessa lowered her gaze, then met his eyes again. "You would be marrying Veda as well." "That fact remains unchanged." Boone knelt to adjust a bootlace that had come loose on his ankle. "I believed I already had." She knelt beside him, her hands lightly touching the soil. "You don't request much, do you?" "I don't require much," he replied. "Just the two of you and the earth beneath our feet." Veda then came running, her arms laden with feathers and brimming with excitement. "Mama, Mr. Helena has laid an egg." Jessa chuckled and accepted the egg from her small hands. "I suspect Helena might be a Ms. after all." Boone stood, hoisting Veda up under one arm. "Do you suppose she'd put on her finest dress for the ceremony? She'll attempt to wear the scarecrow's hat again. We shall permit it." That evening, Jessa lit the lamp, while Boone applied the finishing touches to the last drawer of the cabinet she had requested. The cabin exuded the scent of pine, beeswax, and the bread she hadn't managed to burn. After Veda was settled beneath the quilt, clutching her stuffed rabbit and listening to a tale about a horse that could speak, Boone prepared the kettle and sat with Jessa at the table. She idly traced the rim of her cup with a single finger. "I never envisioned ending up here, or any of this." Boone observed her hands. "You're regretting it," she stated, shaking her head. "I regret not having faith in this sooner." He reached across the table, gently taking her wrist. "It's here now." She looked at him, her gaze unwavering. "Then yes, I will marry you before the snow begins to fall." 3 weeks later, beneath a sky so intensely blue it was almost painful to behold, they stood at the edge of their cultivated land. The The circuit rider held a weathered book, and Veda was attempting to tie a ribbon around the bride's wrist. Jessa was attired in a dress with repaired seams and boots still bearing the dampness from the creek. Boone wore the same coat he'd had on when he first escorted her home, its cuff mended, its collar clean. They exchanged their marriage vows as the wind rustled their sleeves and the land lay quiet around them. After the preacher departed, Veda led them back to the porch, where a freshly baked pie cooled and the chickens pecked at the grass. Boone lifted Jessa's hand to his lips. She leaned into him, resting her forehead against his. "You believe this is what serenity feels like." Boone held her close, their daughter skipping barefoot along the porch railing. "It feels like home." Years elapsed. The land prospered. The wheat yielded bountifully for 3 consecutive autumns. Jessa instructed Veda in reading by the lamplight, and Boone taught her the art of riding by instinct. The root cellar was replenished each fall, the chicken coop withstood every gale, and the house, showing a little wear at the edges, never developed a leak. In the evenings, when the wind whispered softly across the fields and the fire dwindled to its embers, Boone would rest his hand upon Jessa's, his calloused fingers intertwined with hers. She never released his hand. They lived long and fulfilling lives, and never again were they alone.